Audiobook, The Puritan in Holland, England, and America, An Introduction to American History, 1898, Volume 1, Chapter 1, The Netherlands Before the War with Spain, the Country and Its People, Agriculture, Manufactures, Commerce, and Art, The Puritan of Holland, the Country of the Netherlanders, A Conquest of Man, the Geographical Factor in History, England in Illustration, Its Importance in the Netherlands, Influence on the National Character, The Importance of the Human Factor, The Early Inhabitants of the Netherlands, Germans in the North, Celts in the South, the foremost of their races, Their characteristics. The Hollanders preserved their Germanic spirit, connection with Rome and Italy, its influence. Contrast between England and the continent. Italy never became barbarian. The Crusades and their results, Italians in the Netherlands, development of agriculture. The Netherlands become the instructors of Europe, England's backwardness. Development of manufactures and commerce. They become the manufacturing center of Europe. Originate woolen manufactures, advance in the 14th century. Wealth and luxury, as compared with France and England, outstrip Italy in the commercial race. Their architecture, ecclesiastical and secular, their town halls the delight of the artist, private dwellings, their furniture, etc. Comparison with England painting, founders of modern art. Discover oil painting, originate portrait and landscape painting, character of Netherland art. The beautiful, the splendor of the true foremost in the mechanical arts, jewelry, tapestry, etc. Wood engraving their discovery, printing from blocks, printing from type its natural sequence, music. Furnish music and musicians to Europe for 2 centuries. The Puritan of Holland, the Country of the Netherlanders, A Conquest of Man. The Geographical Factor in History, England in Illustration, Its Importance in the Netherlands, Influence on the National Character. The Importance of the Human Factor. The Early Inhabitants of the Netherlands, Germans in the North, Celts in the South, the foremost of their races. Their characteristics. The Hollanders preserved their Germanic spirit, connection with Rome and Italy, its influence. Contrast between England and the continent. Italy never became barbarian. The Crusades and their results. Italians in the Netherlands, development of agriculture. The Netherlands become the instructors of Europe, England's backwardness. Development of manufactures and commerce. They become the manufacturing center of Europe. Originate woolen manufactures, advance in the 14th century. Wealth and luxury, as compared with France and England. Outstrip Italy in the commercial race. Their architecture, ecclesiastical and secular. Their town halls the delight of the artist. Private dwellings, their furniture, etc. Comparison with England painting, founders of modern art. Discover oil painting, originate portrait and landscape painting, character of Netherland art. The beautiful, the splendor of the true foremost in the mechanical arts, jewelry, tapestry, etc. Wood engraving their discovery, printing from blocks, printing from type its natural sequence, music. Furnish music and musicians to Europe for 2 centuries. The Puritan of Holland was not the product of England. His birthplace was among the people who dwelt in the lowlands of the Rhine and the Meuse. The land which they inhabited, after being once covered by the sea, was slowly rescued by the hand of man. Its soil was artificial, its existence a miracle. Here the struggle for life was incessant. To keep back the ocean, to restrain the rivers, to carry off the waters of the inland lakes and swamps. Drainage ditches, dikes, sluices, and canals had to be constructed and kept in constant repair. The history of such a people, as traced in their institutions, is the record of the development of self-reliance and common sense. The struggle with nature for life produced in them the qualities which prepared them to battle for freedom. The geographical factor in history has not always been appreciated, and yet its influence is ofttimes the most marked. In no country is this more apparent than in England. an island separated from the continent by an arm of the sea, so narrow that the passage can be made in a few hours, but still so broad as to prevent easy communication and the rapid transfer of ideas. England has always possessed certain elements of strength in her isolation. That very isolation, however, has made her insular in the other sense, has narrowed her interests, and thrown a veil over the achievements of other nations. This insularity has fostered a self-appreciation, which has sometimes blinded her people to their own defects and led them to undervalue the influences which came to them from without. In the Netherlands, the geographical influence was even more controlling. There, the contest was not merely with surrounding nations, but with nature herself. The struggle was not one of defense alone, but of daily existence, with a country reclaimed from the sea and still in danger of being again submerged. The Netherlander learned self-government in his efforts to protect his home. His dikes had to be built and watched. His canals had to be kept clear. His seawalls had to be strengthened. And all these tasks involved not only toil, but combination and organization. Thus, the spirit of self-help and mutual cooperation became a part of his nature. The national character was molded by these physical surroundings. The early inhabitants of this land were of two races. In the north were the Germans, in the south, the Celts. Among these, as in all such minglings, the strongest survived. The Germans predominated, and it was from them that the Hollanders derived their manly independence and tenacity of purpose. Tacitus wrote of these Germans that they were honest and simple, fond of liberty and loyal to their chiefs. They were brave in war and faithful in peace. Such were the ancestors of the Puritan of Holland. In the Netherlands, this Germanic spirit was preserved more purely than elsewhere. The feudal system, which spread over other portions of Europe, never gained a firm foothold here. The people held their lands in allodial tenure. The towns had charters and governed themselves. The country population were free peasants, not serfs. The influence of Rome came to the Netherlands, not through conquest alone, but also through commerce. After the empire fell, and the long night of barbarism settled upon Europe, Italy still retained some traces of civilization. She was never completely barbarian. Her cities lived on, and her culture smoldered, ready to break forth in flame. The Crusades helped to revive this ancient civilization. They opened the East to the West. They stimulated commerce and quickened thought. The returning warriors brought back new ideas, new wants, new ambitions. Italy profited first and most. Her cities became rich and powerful. Her merchants pushed their way into every market. The Netherlands came next. Her people were quick to learn. They copied what was best. They improved on what they copied. Italians came to dwell among them, bringing their arts and industries. The Netherlanders soon surpassed their teachers. In agriculture, they took the lead of the world. They reclaimed the marshes. They fertilized the sands. They drained the bogs. They made the land blossom like the rose. In manufactures, they showed equal skill. Their woolen fabrics were famous. Their looms turned out the finest cloths. They worked in metals with rare delicacy. They made jewelry, tapestry, glass, and porcelain. Their cities became the workshops of Europe. In commerce, they outstripped all competitors. They built ships and sailed them. They traded with every land. They planted colonies. They explored distant seas. Their merchants rivaled those of Venice and Genoa. Their architecture showed their wealth and taste. They built churches, town halls, and guild houses, which remain the admiration of the world. Their homes were models of comfort and cleanliness. Their furniture was carved with skill. Their windows admitted light, and their rooms were adorned with paintings. In painting, they were the founders of modern art. They discovered oil painting. They were the first to paint portraits and landscapes. Their pictures were truthful. They made art a reflection of life. Their motto was, "The beautiful is the splendor of the true." In the mechanical arts, they were also foremost. They invented new tools, perfected processes, and made machinery serve the needs of man. They discovered wood engraving. They printed from blocks. Then they invented movable types, printing from type followed as a natural sequence. In music, they were equally advanced. For 2 centuries, they furnished music and musicians to Europe. Their schools taught composition and harmony. Their organs filled the churches with melody. Their singers were welcomed in every court. Such was the land and such the people from whom the Puritan of Holland sprang. It was among them that the principles were developed which gave strength to English Puritanism, and through it to the institutions of America. Chapter 2. The Netherlands before the war with Spain, the guilds, the towns, the state, education, religion, and morals. Contrast between Puritanism in the Netherlands and in England, and causes of difference. Condition of the Netherlands at the abdication of Charles V, 1555. 17 separate states, each with its individual government. Their population, Holland and the herring fishery. The towns of the Netherlands, a survival of Roman institutions. Citadels of freedom, Bruges and its origin. A modern town, the guilds, partly Roman and partly German, their organization and government. Minor republics, spirit of equality in guilds. Albert Dürer and the Painters' Guild of Antwerp. The Netherland towns, their charters and form of government. Antwerp, a type of the larger towns' town government in Holland, the rural districts. Serfdom abolished. Condition of the peasants, the organization of the state and state government. No taxation without consent. First meeting of the States General, 1477. The Magna Charta of Holland. Its provisions, freedom of trade and commerce education. Organization of the Brethren of the Life in Common, 1400. Their numerous schools and their influence on education. Scholars in the Netherlands. Erasmus, Vesalius, Saint Aldegonde, etc. Phenomenal education of the masses. The Reformation in the Netherlands. Heresy, an old story. Early editions of the Bible in the common tongue. More generally read than in any other country. The Reformation begins at the bottom among the common people. Its exceptional character, victims of the Inquisition, greater in number than in all the rest of Europe Protestant sects in the Netherlands. Lutherans, Calvinists, and Anabaptists, religion and morality not necessarily allied in Europe in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. This severance not confined to the Catholics' Holland, a moral country. And so, the bulwark of Protestantism, private and public integrity, high position of her women. Chapter 2. The Netherlands before the war with Spain. The guilds, the towns, the state, education, religion, and morals. The Puritan of England differed widely from the Puritan of Holland. One was stern and intolerant. The other was mild and tolerant. One was born of persecution in a land where the monarch ruled supreme. The other grew up under a republican government where the people were the rulers. The contrast between them arose from the difference in their environment. When Charles V abdicated in 1555, the Netherlands were a group of 17 separate states. Each had its own government, its own laws, its own customs. Some were large, others small. Some were inland, others on the coast, but all were prosperous and intelligent. The whole population numbered about 3 millions. Holland, one of the smallest provinces, had already become famous for its herring fishery. This industry gave employment to thousands. It supplied the people with food. It furnished cargoes for their ships. It stimulated commerce. It trained sailors and developed naval strength. The towns of the Netherlands were the centers of wealth and power. They were a survival of the Roman municipal system. They were also a development of the Germanic idea of self-government. They were citadels of freedom. Bruges was one of the oldest. Its origin is lost in the mists of time, but in the Middle Ages it became a modern town. It had paved streets, stately buildings, and busy marts. It was the resort of merchants from all lands. Its guilds controlled its industries. These guilds were partly Roman and partly German. They were associations of craftsmen. They regulated trade. They protected the workmen. They enforced rules of honesty and skill. Each guild was a little republic. It had its officers, its laws, its treasury. It held its meetings, kept its records, and trained its apprentices. In the guilds, all were equal. There were no privileged classes. Merit ruled. Albert Dürer, the great artist, visited Antwerp in 1520. He paid his respects to the Painters' Guild. He noted their organization and influence. He saw how art was fostered by corporate union. The towns of the Netherlands had charters. These were granted by the sovereigns in early times. They conferred rights and privileges. They secured the people against arbitrary rule. Antwerp was a type of the larger towns. It had its burgomaster, its council, its courts. It levied taxes, it regulated trade, it maintained order. Its government was in the hands of the citizens. In Holland, the towns were even more democratic. They chose their magistrates. They made their own laws. They were almost independent republics. The rural districts were not behind the towns in liberty. Serfdom had been abolished. The peasants were free. They owned their land. They paid light taxes. They had schools and churches. They were intelligent and self-respecting. The whole state was organized on liberal principles. There was no taxation without consent. The people elected their representatives. These met in the states of the province. The states sent deputies to the States General. This body first met in 1477. It was the national parliament. It had limited powers, but it could refuse supplies. It could make complaints. It formed a nucleus for future development. In 1477 also was granted the Magna Charta of Holland. It guaranteed the rights of the people. It secured freedom of trade. It established equality before the law. It made arbitrary rule impossible. Commerce flourished under these conditions. Merchants felt safe. Contracts were enforced. Property was respected. Education was not neglected. In 1400, the Brethren of the Life in Common were organized. They were a religious society, but their main work was educational. They established schools. They trained teachers. They taught the young. They encouraged study. They promoted learning among the people. Their schools became famous. They attracted scholars from abroad. Erasmus was one of their pupils. Vesalius, the anatomist, was trained in their methods. Saint Aldegonde, the statesman, was one of their number. Education spread rapidly. The masses shared its benefits. Few countries could show so many who could read and write. The Reformation found in the Netherlands a soil prepared. Heresy was not new. The people had long read the Bible in their own tongue. They had editions printed in the 14th century. They studied it freely. They discussed it openly. They did not wait for Luther or Calvin. The movement began at the bottom. It was not led by princes or nobles. It was a people's movement. Its character was exceptional. It was thoughtful, earnest, sincere. The Inquisition was introduced to check it, but it failed. Its victims were more numerous than in all the rest of Europe. The people endured martyrdom with fortitude. They clung to their faith. Protestant sects sprang up. There were Lutherans, Calvinists, and Anabaptists. Each had its doctrines. Each had its followers. Religion and morality were not always allied in Europe. This was true of the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. Men professed faith, but lived in vice. This severance was not confined to Catholics. It appeared among Protestants. But in Holland, the union was more complete. The country was moral. It became the bulwark of Protestantism. Its people were honest and industrious. Its officials were upright. Its merchants were trusted. Its women held high position. They were educated and respected. They influenced society. They aided in good works. They made the home a center of purity and refinement. Thus Holland, before the war with Spain, was a land of liberty, intelligence, industry, and morality. Its people were trained for the great conflict. They were ready to fight for their faith and freedom. Chapter 3. Revolution in the Netherlands, 1550-1574. Why revolution did not come earlier. Philip II. Contrasted with his father, Charles V. 11 Years of Misrule and Inquisition, Origin of the Beggars, 1566, the iconoclasts Philip II, and his chief advisor, the Duke of Alva Bright, Prospects for Spain a Century Before, How Her Liberty Was Destroyed. Disastrous Effects of Discovery of America on Spanish Character, Ruin of National Prosperity. Military Greatness, Alva, a typical Spanish soldier of the time. His arrival in the Netherlands, 1567. The Council of Blood, Exodus of Netherlanders to England. William of Orange, his undisciplined armies defeated by Alva. The Beggars of the Sea. Elizabeth's seizure of Philip's money, Alva's financial difficulties. His proposed tax and its effects, suspension of business, and Alva's plan for its renewal, capture of Brill by the Beggars, 1572, general uprising in the northern provinces, reorganization of the government by a popular vote, bright prospects for the future, 1572, France friendly, deliverance at hand, massacre of St. Bartholomew, its causes and disastrous results in the Netherlands. Elizabeth's connection with it cuts off all hopes of French assistance, Holland left to fight alone, reliance of William of Orange on Providence. Basis of Puritanism, position of Holland and character of the war, the Siege of Haarlem, 1573. Its surrender, cold-blooded butchery of garrison and inhabitants, great loss of Spaniards, Spaniards repulsed from Alkmaar, refused to assault the works. The country flooded Alva recalled to Spain, his work a failure. Succeeded by Requesens siege of Leyden begun, 1574. Successes of the Patriots, rejection of proposed amnesty on condition of giving up the religious question, Leyden saved by cutting its dikes. Heroism of the inhabitants' University of Leyden, founded, 1575. Marks an epoch in the history of education, becomes the center of the learning of Europe, its famous scholars. Honors accorded to them, contributions of Holland to science. Invents the telescope, microscope, pendulum clock, etc. Tolerance of Leyden. English dissenters among its pupils, University of Franeker. Instruction free, as in Leyden application of confiscated church property in the Netherlands. Contrast with England hospitals and soldiers' homes. Why revolution did not come earlier. Philip II. Contrasted with his father, Charles V. Charles V had ruled with a certain degree of moderation. He had respected local privileges. He had sought to unite the various provinces under one scepter, but not to destroy their liberties. Philip II, on the other hand, was narrow, bigoted, and tyrannical. He knew nothing of the Netherlands. He hated their independence. He resolved to crush it. For 11 years he governed them by deputies. These men were instruments of his will. They introduced the Inquisition. They suppressed liberty. They trampled on the rights of the people. Discontent spread. Hatred of Spain grew deeper. In 1566, the movement of resistance began. It took the name of the Beggars. This name had been given in derision by one of the royal councillors. The patriots accepted it with pride. It became the symbol of liberty. About this time occurred the outbreak of the iconoclasts. Inflamed by preaching, the populace in some towns rose against the images in the churches. They destroyed the statues and pictures. They defaced the altars. They stripped the churches of their ornaments. Philip was filled with rage. He determined to crush the revolt. He sent the Duke of Alva to the Netherlands with an army. Alva was a typical Spanish soldier of the age. He was brave, skillful, and utterly remorseless. Spain, a century before, had been full of hope and promise. Her people were brave and industrious. Her institutions gave promise of liberty. But the discovery of America ruined her. It brought her gold, but destroyed her character. It fostered pride and idleness. It made war her chief industry. Her national prosperity disappeared. Her military greatness remained. Alva landed in the Netherlands in 1567. He began his work of repression. He organized the Council of Blood. This body condemned thousands to death. It confiscated property. It filled the land with terror. Many of the Netherlanders fled. They took refuge in England. They carried with them their arts and industries. William of Orange took up arms. He gathered undisciplined troops. They fought bravely, but were defeated. The patriots turned to the sea. They became corsairs. They called themselves the beggars of the sea. They preyed on Spanish commerce. They struck terror to the foe. Elizabeth of England played a double game. She hated Spain, but feared war. She seized some of Philip's treasure ships. This enabled the beggars to fit out a fleet. Alva tried to raise money. He imposed a tax of 10% on all sales. The people resisted. Trade stopped. Alva tried to revive it by suspending the tax. In 1572, the beggars of the sea captured Brill. This event marked the turning point. The people rose. Town after town declared for the cause. The northern provinces united. They reorganized their government. They acted by a popular vote. The future seemed bright. France was friendly. Assistance was expected. But the massacre of St. Bartholomew changed all. It occurred in 1572. Thousands of Huguenots were slain. The effect in the Netherlands was disheartening. Hope from France was cut off. Elizabeth of England was suspected of complicity. Holland was left to fight alone. William of Orange did not despair. He trusted in Providence. This was the basis of Puritanism. Holland was a small country. Its people were few. Its cities were isolated. Its territory was exposed. The war was unequal. But the cause was righteous. The siege of Haarlem began in 1573. The city resisted bravely. It held out for 7 months. When it surrendered, the Spaniards massacred the garrison and many of the citizens. But they lost 12,000 men. They next besieged Alkmaar. The people resisted fiercely. They refused to yield. The country was flooded. The Spaniards withdrew. Alva's work was a failure. He was recalled to Spain. Rackison succeeded him. He was more moderate, but the war continued. The siege of Leyden began in 1574. The city was strong. The inhabitants were resolute. They suffered famine and disease. They refused to surrender. The Prince of Orange cut the dikes. The waters rose. The Spaniards retreated. The city was saved. In gratitude, the states founded a university. This was in 1575. It marked an epoch. The University of Leyden became famous. It was the center of learning in Europe. Its scholars were renowned. They were honored throughout the world. Holland made great contributions to science. Her inventors gave the world the telescope, the microscope, and the pendulum clock. The university was tolerant. English dissenters studied there. Another university was established at Franeker. Instruction was free. The church property confiscated during the war was not given to nobles. It was used for education and charity. Hospitals were founded. Soldiers' homes were built. Thus Holland, in the midst of war, laid the foundations of liberty and learning. Chapter 4. Revolution in the Netherlands. Independence declared. Assassination of William of Orange. Religious toleration established. 1574-1585. The perilous condition of Holland. After the siege of Leyden, the situation was desperate. The provinces were isolated. The Spanish armies were still strong. The southern towns wavered in their allegiance. The people were worn with war and burdened with taxes. But they did not falter. They had tasted freedom. They had seen what they could accomplish by union and courage. The death of Requesens in 1576 opened a new chapter. There was no successor at hand. The Spanish troops, unpaid and discontented, mutinied. They seized towns. They pillaged and massacred. Antwerp was sacked. 7,000 of her citizens were slain. This horror, called the Spanish Fury, aroused all the provinces. Catholic and Protestant united. They signed the Pacification of Ghent. It was a compact for union and defense. They agreed to drive out the Spaniards. They pledged themselves to respect freedom of conscience. Don John of Austria was sent as governor by Philip. He was the hero of Lepanto. He was ambitious, brilliant, and romantic. He dreamed of conquering England, of marrying Mary Stuart, and of restoring Catholicism. But the Netherlanders distrusted him. They refused his overtures. They demanded the withdrawal of the Spanish troops. A temporary agreement was made. The soldiers departed, but Philip would not yield. Don John resumed hostilities. He captured Namur. He died suddenly in 1578. He was succeeded by Alexander Farnese, Prince of Parma. Parma was a great general and a skillful diplomat. He bribed where he could not conquer. He detached the southern provinces. The north remained firm. In 1579, the Union of Utrecht was formed. It was the written constitution of the new republic. It united the northern provinces. It pledged them to mutual defense. It was the foundation of Dutch independence. In 1581, they declared their independence of Spain. The act was solemn and deliberate. It recited the wrongs of Philip. It justified resistance. It renounced allegiance. This declaration is memorable. It preceded the English Bill of Rights by a century. It was a model for the American Declaration of Independence. The people offered the sovereignty to the Duke of Anjou, brother of the French king. They wished to secure protection. Anjou came to the Netherlands. He was frivolous, vain, and incompetent. He intrigued with Elizabeth of England. She coquetted with him. She hesitated between alliance and war. Anjou accepted the sovereignty. He attempted to seize Antwerp by treachery. His scheme failed. He fled in disgrace. He died in 1584. Meanwhile, Philip sought to destroy William of Orange. He offered a reward for his assassination. Several attempts were made. At last, in July 1584, William was shot at Delft by a fanatic. He died a martyr to liberty. He was the foremost Puritan of his age. He had rescued 7 provinces. He had founded a state. He had taught religious toleration. His task was the most difficult ever attempted. He stood between Catholic and Protestant, between monarch and people. He was misunderstood and maligned, but he remained firm. His death was a calamity, but his work lived. The Republic survived. Religious toleration was his greatest gift to mankind. It was new in Europe. Elsewhere, all parties persecuted. In Holland, liberty of conscience was established. William protected the Anabaptists. They were hated and despised. They had first proclaimed the separation of church and state. They had pleaded for freedom of conscience. They were persecuted by Catholics and Protestants alike. In Holland, they found refuge. There, they prospered. Their doctrines took root. They bore fruit in America. Religious liberty in the United States dates from Holland. Virginia proclaimed it in 1776. New York embodied it in her Constitution. The general government adopted it. The principle came from the Netherlands. Thus, the assassination of William of Orange did not destroy the cause. The people stood firm. They would not surrender. They would not accept a monarch. They founded a republic. They again offered the sovereignty to France. But the Holy League had been formed. Henry of Navarre was at war. France could not help. Spain seemed irresistible. She aspired to universal dominion. The Armada was being prepared. Protestant England stood in the path. Elizabeth could no longer temporize. She was forced into the conflict. The cause of the Netherlands became the cause of England. A new chapter was about to open. Chapter 5. England and the Netherlands. Defeat of the Armada. Decline of Spain. Independence of Holland. Virtually established, 1585 or 1609. Philip prepares for war with England. Motives for hostility, religious animosity. Assistance rendered by Elizabeth to the Netherlands, seizure of Spanish treasure ships. Execution of Mary Stuart, English privateers in Spanish waters. Formation of the Armada. Its immense cost and importance, Spain's navy. At this time, the greatest in the world, decline of the country already begun. Her intellectual and industrial stagnation, her colonies' sources of weakness rather than strength, effect of her religious persecutions, expulsion of the Jews and Moors, persecution of the Protestants, loss of her best citizens. The Armada sails, 1588. Its composition, number of vessels and men, its commander. The Duke of Medina, Sidonia, the English fleet under Howard and Drake, inferiority of English ships and guns, advantages of better seamanship and discipline, tactics of the English, the Armada forced to retreat, destroyed by storm and battle effect on Europe. New position of England, assistance to the Netherlands. Progress of the war, Spain still strong in the southern Netherlands. Her resources limited, the northern provinces organize a permanent republic government and finances of Holland, the Bank of Amsterdam. Its services to commerce and finance, a moneyed institution without a parallel. Its honesty and methods, its influence on European banking, agriculture, manufactures, and trade. Unexampled prosperity of Holland, her intellectual and moral leadership. Establishment of the Dutch East India Company, 1602. Greatness of the Republic, negotiations for peace, 12 years truce, 1609. Spain recognizes the United Provinces, their independence virtually secured. This act a blow to the Catholic power of Europe. The work of William of Orange accomplished, his descendants still excluded from power. The Republic firmly rooted in liberty and toleration. Influence of its example on the world. Contrast with Spain foundation laid for the Puritan emigration to America. Philip II, prepared for war with England. His motives were many. Religious animosity burned fiercely. Elizabeth was the champion of Protestantism. She had aided the Netherlands. She had seized Spanish treasure ships. She had executed Mary Stuart. English privateers had swept the seas. They had plundered Spanish colonies. They had insulted the flag of Spain. Philip resolved to crush this insolent island. He formed the Armada. Its cost was immense. Its importance was worldwide. Spain's navy was then the greatest in the world, but her decline had already begun. Intellect and industry had decayed. Her colonies drained her resources. They did not strengthen the state. Religious persecution had done its work. The Jews and Moors had been expelled. The Protestants had been slain or exiled. The best citizens were gone. The Armada sailed in 1588. It was a vast fleet, 130 ships, 8,000 sailors, 19,000 soldiers. It was commanded by the Duke of Medina Sidonia, a nobleman without experience. The English fleet was commanded by Howard and Drake. It was inferior in size and guns, but it had better sailors. Its discipline was superior. Its tactics were skillful. The English harassed the Armada. They avoided close combat. They used fire ships. They scattered the enemy. The Spaniards retreated. A storm completed the work. Half the fleet was destroyed. The blow was fatal. Spain never recovered. The effect in Europe was profound. England rose to new dignity. She became the bulwark of Protestantism. She gave more aid to the Netherlands. The war went on. Spain still held the southern provinces, but her resources were limited. The northern provinces organized a republic. Its government was wise and firm. Its finances were carefully administered. The Bank of Amsterdam was established. It was a marvel of honesty. It kept perfect accounts. It gave perfect security. It made transfers without coin. It gave the world a model for banking. It influenced the whole of Europe. Agriculture flourished. Manufactures multiplied. Trade increased. Holland grew rich. She led the world in industry. She led in intelligence. She led in moral strength. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company was founded. It was a mighty corporation. It carried the flag of the Republic to every sea. It brought wealth and dominion. The little state became great. Spain saw her efforts vain. Negotiations for peace began. In 1609, a truce was signed. It was to last 12 years. It recognized the United Provinces. Their independence was virtually secured. This was a blow to Catholic domination. It was the triumph of liberty. It was the fulfillment of William's work. He had died without reward. His descendants were excluded from power, but his principles triumphed. The Republic was firm. It was rooted in liberty. It was founded on toleration. Its example influenced the world. It stood in contrast with Spain. It became a refuge for the oppressed. It was the cradle of modern freedom. It prepared the way for the Puritan emigration. It laid the foundation of America. Chapter 6. Relations of England and Holland after the truce. The Pilgrims in Leyden. Their history in England, their settlement in America, and influence on political institutions. Change in the relations of England and Holland after the truce. From allies to rivals, rise of Dutch commerce. Its supremacy, England becomes jealous. The East India trade, the navigation, acts, the Dutch in America, the Dutch and English in the East, rivalry in shipping, England's fears of Dutch commercial and naval supremacy, religious refugees in Holland, the Pilgrims from England, history of the separatists, persecution under Elizabeth and James, Barrow and Greenwood, congregation at Scrooby, their flight to Holland, settlement at Amsterdam, removal to Leyden, 1609. Why they left Amsterdam, their residence in Leyden for 11 years. Character of the Leyden congregation. Testimony of Dutch magistrates. Social condition of the Pilgrims in Holland. Their trades and occupations. Influence of Dutch institutions upon them. Self-government in church and state. Their church covenant, the germ of the American Constitution. Departure for America. 1620. Reasons for their emigration. Dread of their children's becoming Dutch religious motives. Desire for separation from the world. Love of adventure. Commercial support for the colony. The voyage of the Mayflower landing at Plymouth, formation of a government. The Mayflower Compact. Its historical significance. Recognition of popular government and equal laws. Influence of Dutch example upon the Pilgrims. A comparison with the English colony in Virginia. Pilgrims create institutions from the beginning, no royal or proprietary charter. Religious tolerance in the Plymouth colony. No persecution. Contrast with Massachusetts Bay. Religious democracy becomes political democracy. Church membership not required for suffrage. Importance of the Plymouth colony in American history. It saves the principles of Puritanism from perversion. Its permanent influence on the Republic of the United States. After the Truce of 1609, the relations of England and Holland underwent a change. They had been allies. They now became rivals. Dutch commerce rose rapidly. It became supreme. The Dutch flag floated on every sea. Their ships outnumbered all others. England looked on with jealousy. She feared this commercial supremacy. The East India trade became a source of strife. The Dutch monopolized it. They planted colonies. They built forts. They excluded rivals. England sought a share. She passed the Navigation Acts. She forbade foreign ships to carry English goods. She fought the Dutch in the East. America also became a field of rivalry. The Dutch settled New Netherland. They founded New Amsterdam. They traded up the Hudson. The English watched them. They claimed the same territory. Disputes arose. Meanwhile, Holland was a refuge for the oppressed. Religious exiles fled there. Among them were the English separatists. They had rejected the Church of England. They refused to conform. They met in secret. They were hunted down. Barrow and Greenwood were hanged. Others were imprisoned. A congregation gathered at Scrooby. It was composed of humble people. They resolved to flee. They attempted to sail. They were betrayed. They tried again. They reached Amsterdam. It was in 1608. There they found other exiles, but dissensions arose. They removed to Leiden. This was in 1609. They lived there for 11 years. They were poor, but industrious. They worked at trades, they set up printing presses, they made cloth, they taught school, they were respected, the Dutch magistrates praised them, they lived in peace, they kept their faith. But they feared for their children. They dreaded absorption. They saw danger in Dutch customs. They longed for a separate life. They wished to preserve their language and religion. They resolved to emigrate again. They turned to America. They sought a place to plant a colony. They negotiated with English companies. They obtained permission. They secured aid. They made a covenant. This covenant was the germ of the Constitution. It was an agreement for self-government. They would elect officers. They would make just laws. They would obey them. In 1620 they sailed. The Mayflower bore them across the sea. They landed at Plymouth. They were beyond their charter. They acted for themselves. They framed the Mayflower Compact. It recognized popular government. It acknowledged equal laws. It was based on mutual consent. It was the beginning of democracy. The example of Holland had taught them. They had seen self-government in church and state. They reproduced it in the wilderness. They differed from the Virginia colonists. The latter came under royal grant. They brought English institutions. The Pilgrims created their own. They had no church establishment. They tolerated dissent. They persecuted no man. They formed a religious democracy. Church and state were separate. No one was disfranchised for opinion. In this they were unlike Massachusetts Bay. There, church membership was required. In Plymouth, it was not. Thus the Plymouth colony became important. It preserved Puritanism in its purity. It saved it from perversion. It influenced the future republic. Its principles became national. They were planted in American soil. They bore fruit in the Constitution. They endure to this day. Chapter 7. The influence of the Netherlands on England during the Puritan Revolution, rise of Dutch republican ideas in England, influence on English literature and philosophy. The Netherland War of Independence, a century in advance of the English. The Dutch, a schoolmaster to England. Influence of Holland on English Puritanism. Many English Puritans lived in Holland, carried back her ideas of government and tolerance English soldiers in the Netherlands. Learn republican ideas in Dutch camps Sir Philip Sidney and Lord Essex. English nobles fight for liberty in Holland. Effect on the army of Cromwell. His officers trained in the Dutch war rise of republican thought in England. Books from Holland. Their influence on English parliamentarians. Dutch books secretly circulated in England. The Long Parliament and the ideas of Grotius religious toleration discussed. Milton and Roger Williams, indebted to Dutch thought, the independents and their Dutch sympathies, ideas of state and church drawn from Holland, influence on English literature, rise of popular pamphlet writing, freedom of the press in Holland books printed in Amsterdam and Leiden. For English readers, Dutch influence on English philosophy, Lord Bacon and Descartes, Hobbes and the Dutch thinkers, rise of social contract theory. The Dutch Republic as a model of limited government effect on English constitutional development. Milton's Areopagitica and Dutch liberty of the press. John Locke's theory of government and Dutch experience, influence of the Netherlands on modern English political thought, republicanism, toleration, and education. The English Revolution finds its intellectual support in Dutch example. Connection between the Dutch and the Glorious Revolution, William of Orange called to the throne of England, Holland's political philosophy transplanted to English soil, its enduring place in Anglo-American liberty. The War of Independence in the Netherlands was a century in advance of the English Revolution. It furnished an example. It was a schoolmaster to England. Dutch republicanism preceded English republicanism. Its principles filtered across the sea. Holland was a refugee for the persecuted. English Puritans lived there. They absorbed its ideas. They carried them back to England. They returned with lessons in self-government. They had seen toleration in practice. They had lived under a written constitution. They had breathed the air of civil and religious liberty. Many English soldiers served in the Netherlands. They fought against Spain. They saw Dutch methods. They learned to despise tyranny. Sir Philip Sidney died at Zutphen. Lord Essex fought under Maurice of Nassau. The Puritan officers of Cromwell had Dutch training. They had studied discipline in foreign camps. They had imbibed ideas of liberty. The influence of Holland was thus military and civil. Books came from the Netherlands. They were printed at Amsterdam and Leyden. They were secretly circulated in England. They taught freedom of thought. They denounced despotism. They glorified the rights of man. The ideas of Grotius reached Parliament. The Long Parliament felt their power. Toleration was discussed. Milton read Dutch authors. Roger Williams acknowledged his debt. He had lived in Holland. He had learned the lesson of liberty. He had seen the distinction between church and state. He proclaimed it in America. He practiced it in Rhode Island. The independents in England were the natural allies of Holland. They admired its republicanism. They adopted its ideas. The church was self-governing. The state was limited. Power resided in the people. This conception came from the Netherlands. Literature in England felt the influence. Pamphlets multiplied. They resembled the Dutch political tracts. Freedom of the press had been tried in Holland. It was unknown in England, but men demanded it. They pointed to the Republic. Books were printed abroad. They were smuggled in. They stirred men's minds. Philosophy also was affected. Lord Bacon turned toward the modern spirit. Descartes, a Frenchman, taught in Holland. Hobbes read Dutch thinkers. He evolved his theory of the social contract. The Dutch Republic was a model. It had no king. It was governed by law. It showed that monarchy was not essential. That lesson was not forgotten. It passed into English thought. It appeared in Locke's writings. It entered the American Declaration of Independence. Milton's Areopagitica echoed Dutch freedom. It pleaded for the liberty of unlicensed printing. It cited the Republic. It glorified Holland as a land of letters. John Locke lived in Holland. He wrote there. He studied its institutions. He borrowed its principles. His theory of government rested on experience. It appealed to reason. It justified revolution. Thus, the influence of the Netherlands was wide and deep. It shaped English politics. It shaped American politics. It taught republicanism. It taught toleration. It taught the value of education. When the English Revolution came, its ideas were Dutch. The glorious revolution of 1688 was born in Holland. William of Orange came to the throne. He brought with him his political creed. It became the creed of England. It became the creed of America. The Puritan and the Dutchman joined hands. Together they molded the future. Together they laid the foundations of Anglo-American liberty. Chapter 8. Holland. In the 17th century, its toleration, industry, art, education, and domestic life contrasts with other European states. The 17th century, the golden age of Holland, a small country with great power. She led the world in commerce. She led in finance. She led in education and letters. She led in toleration. No other nation could compare with her. Her population was small. Her territory was limited. But her influence was vast. She was a republic amid monarchies. She was tolerant amid persecutions. She gave shelter to the oppressed. Jews fled there. Huguenots found refuge. English dissenters were welcomed. The press was free. Books were published that were banned elsewhere. Philosophers found security. Spinoza lived and taught there. Descartes found a home. Bayle edited his journal in Holland. The Republic protected thought. She feared no heresy. She silenced no opinion. In this she was unique. France was Catholic. England was intolerant. Germany was divided and harsh. But Holland stood for freedom. Her toleration was not perfect. There were limitations. but they were slight compared with her neighbors. She gave liberty to conscience. She separated church and state. She gave no supremacy to any creed. Her clergy were not dominant. Her government was lay. Her citizens were equal in law. Industry flourished under such conditions. Commerce covered every sea. The Dutch East India Company was supreme. Her merchants controlled the markets. Her ships outnumbered all others. She traded in spices, silks, and sugar. She planted colonies. She founded Batavia. She held the Cape of Good Hope. She established posts in America. Her wealth increased. She became the banker of Europe. The Bank of Amsterdam was trusted everywhere. Its notes were as good as coin. Her methods were exact. Her integrity was unquestioned. Art flourished with wealth. The Dutch school of painting rose to fame. Rembrandt, Frans Hals, and Vermeer stand preeminent. Their pictures portrayed daily life. They painted the citizen, the home, the market, and the street. They avoided allegory. They shunned classical idealism. They represented the real. They glorified the domestic. Their art was sincere. It was national. It was born of liberty. Education kept pace with art. Schools were numerous. They were supported by the state. They were open to all. Reading and writing were general. Dutch sailors were intelligent. Dutch merchants were trained. Their letters showed skill and culture. Universities led in scholarship. Leyden was foremost. It welcomed all creeds. It taught science. It fostered inquiry. Its scholars were known in every land. It stood beside Oxford and Paris. In some respects, it excelled them. Its freedom of thought was unexampled. Its influence was immense. Domestic life in Holland was admirable. Homes were clean and orderly. Women were respected. They were educated. They shared in trade. They governed households. They trained children. They upheld morals. The Dutch home was the basis of the state. It was the source of strength. It gave stability. It fostered virtue. The Dutch were not frivolous. They were not corrupt. They lived plainly. They thought seriously. They worked industriously. They saved prudently. They gave to charity. They helped the poor. They built hospitals. They founded asylums. They provided for the aged. Their government was a democracy. It was not noisy. It was not theatrical. It was practical and just. It protected liberty. It maintained order. It encouraged industry. It rewarded merit. It punished crime. It respected opinion. Other nations marveled at it. Some ridiculed it. But it endured. It proved stable. It gave lessons to Europe. Its contrasts were marked. France had Louis XIV. England had Charles I. Germany had princes and war. Spain had the Inquisition. But Holland had peace, freedom, and prosperity. She showed what liberty could do. She stood as a beacon. She pointed the way. She proved that republicanism was practical, that toleration was safe, that education was essential, that commerce and culture could flourish together. In the 17th century, Holland was the first of nations. Chapter 9. The Decline of Holland. Its causes. Rise of England and France. Destruction of the Republican principle. Final fall of the Dutch Republic. The greatness of Holland not permanent. She declined in the 18th century. The causes were manifold. Wealth brought luxury. Luxury weakened energy. The old virtues declined. Industry lost its vigor. The spirit of adventure died out. The Republic ceased to expand. New powers arose. England grew in strength. France became aggressive. The Navigation Acts of England struck a blow. They aimed at Dutch commerce. They excluded Dutch ships. They protected English merchants. War followed. The Dutch fought bravely. They maintained their position. But their supremacy was shaken. The wars exhausted their resources. The French under Louis XIV invaded. They overran provinces. They threatened Amsterdam. The dikes were cut. The country was flooded. The enemy was checked. But the loss was great. The people were disheartened. The government became weak. Factions arose. The Republic was torn by strife. The House of Orange regained power. William III became King of England. He upheld liberty. But the Republican principle suffered. It lost its vigor. The people ceased to rule. The stadtholder became a prince. Aristocracy crept in. The burghers lost influence. The cities grew inert. Public spirit declined. Corruption increased. The old energy was gone. The press lost freedom. Education declined. Art ceased to flourish. Commerce was overtaken. England took the lead. France became a menace. The Dutch colonies remained, but grew less profitable. The East India Company decayed. Its monopoly stifled progress. The navy declined. The army was inefficient. The people looked backward. They rested on past glory. They failed to meet new conditions. The 18th century was an age of stagnation. Other nations advanced. Holland stood still. Then came the French Revolution. Its ideas spread. They reached the Netherlands. A popular movement arose. It sought reform. It was suppressed. The French returned with arms. They overthrew the old government. They established the Batavian Republic, but it was a puppet. It depended on France. Napoleon made Holland a kingdom. His brother ruled it. Then it was annexed to France. The Republic was dead. Its principle was buried. Its glory had departed. After Napoleon's fall, it reappeared. But it was not the same. It was joined with Belgium. The Union failed. A revolution divided them. Belgium became independent. Holland remained a monarchy. The House of Orange ruled. The old republic was gone. Its traditions lingered. Its spirit had vanished. Yet its influence endured. It had shaped the world. It had taught liberty. It had founded tolerance. It had inspired republics. It had left a legacy. Its life was short. Its work was great. It passed, but it had fulfilled a mission. It was the forerunner of modern democracy. It showed that a free people could govern, that a small state could lead. That principle was stronger than force. Holland declined, but liberty advanced. The Puritan remembered his debt. America claimed the inheritance. The Dutch Republic became a memory, but it remained an example. Its fall was a warning. Its rise was an inspiration. Its work survives in the free institutions of the world. Chapter 10. Summary of the Puritan element in Holland, its bearing on American history. The lesson of Dutch institutions to the United States. The influence of Holland on the Puritan was vital. It gave him shelter. It gave him ideas. It gave him liberty of conscience. It gave him self-government. He saw a republic in operation. He saw the church separated from the state. He saw toleration practiced. He saw education encouraged. He saw the printing press free. He lived among a moral people. He learned to be industrious. He saw order without a king. He saw law without a bishop. He saw prosperity without persecution. He saw strength without conquest. These lessons he carried with him. He bore them across the sea. He planted them in the wilderness. They took root in New England. They bore fruit in the Republic. The Puritan was not wholly English. He had lived in Holland. He had been influenced by Dutch life. His church government was Dutch. His civil polity was Dutch. His educational system was Dutch. His toleration was Dutch. His democracy was Dutch. The Pilgrim Fathers were trained in Leyden. They brought with them Dutch ideas. They had seen the ballot used. They had practiced religious liberty. They had lived under a written constitution. They had seen women educated. They had seen children trained. They had seen honest government. They had seen free discussion. They sought to reproduce it in America. The Mayflower Compact was Dutch in spirit. It rested on mutual agreement. It recognized the people's sovereignty. It made law supreme. It created a republic, in fact. No royal charter gave it birth. No bishop controlled it. No class dominated it. It was government by the governed. This was the Dutch idea. It had not come from England. It had not come from Geneva. It had come from Holland. The Puritan owed much to England. He owed more to Holland. He retained English speech. He retained English literature. He retained English tradition, but his civil and religious liberty came from the Netherlands. The United States inherited this tradition. It accepted religious freedom. It adopted the written Constitution. It affirmed the sovereignty of the people. It established free schools. It recognized the rights of conscience. It separated church and state. It welcomed all creeds. It opened office to all. It gave equality before the law. These were Dutch principles. They were taught in Holland. They were lived in Holland. They were exported to America. They passed into the Constitution. They made the nation great. They still live in the Republic. Holland did not found an empire. She left a greater legacy. She gave the world an idea. That idea was liberty. It triumphed in England. It triumphed in America. It is still triumphant. It survives in the ballot box. It is heard in the schoolroom. It speaks from the press. It rules in the court. It is the spirit of the age. It was born in suffering. It was nursed in exile. It was cradled in Holland. It crossed the sea in the Mayflower. It lives in the stars and stripes. It leads mankind forward. It is the hope of the world. Thus ends the record of the Puritan in Holland. His mission was high. His task was difficult. He struggled long. He suffered much. He failed often, but he succeeded at last. His triumph was not in war. It was in peace. It was not in conquest. It was in thought. He built no throne. He raised no altar. He crowned no king. He set up no hierarchy. He planted a school. He opened a Bible. He proclaimed a principle. That principle was liberty. He made it practical. He made it permanent. He left it as a heritage. It is ours to guard. It is ours to extend. It is ours to transmit. It is the legacy of the Puritan. It is the gift of Holland.
If you found this video insightful and engaging, don't forget to give it a like to support the channel. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming historical videos. Feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts or suggestions for future topics. Thank you for watching.